Darius walked through my front door with that woman on his arm like they were checking into a resort. Tiffany looked around my living room, my grandmother's china still in the hutch, my degrees still on the wall, and had the nerve to ask, "So this is where we're staying?" I set down my pen, stood up slow the way Mama taught me and said, "Baby, the only thing you're getting in this house is the truth. Because the man she thought was hers? He just committed fraud in my name. And I had every receipt." My pulse was hammering so hard I could feel it behind my teeth. The room smelled like her. Some cloying vanilla body spray that didn't belong anywhere near the sage I burned every Sunday. Tiffany's acrylic nails were still hooked through his elbow, and Darius had the nerve to stand there in my doorway with his chest puffed out like he owned the air in here. He didn't own a thing. Not anymore. But I'm getting ahead of myself. To understand how I ended up standing in my own living room, manila folder in hand, watching my husband's whole world crack open at the seams, we have to go back about 10 months. Back to when I still believed in us. Back to when I thought the worst thing Darius could do was leave the toilet seat up and forget to season the chicken properly. Lord, was I wrong. 10 months earlier I was Simone Caldwell, senior pharmaceutical sales rep for one of the biggest firms in the Southeast, pulling in 6 figures before bonuses and sitting pretty in a 2-bedroom condo in Buckhead that I had fallen in love with the moment the realtor turned the key. The marble countertops, the view of Peachtree Street from the balcony, the way the evening light hit the hardwood floors and turned them the color of warm honey. That condo was my baby. I had picked the paint, negotiated the closing costs, and stayed up until 2 in the morning reading every line of the mortgage documents while Darius snored on the couch with the ESPN still glowing on his face. At work, I was the one they sent into the room when a hospital system was about to drop our contract. I could read a boardroom the way Mama read a church congregation, who was leaning in, who had already made up their mind, who needed one more story about patient outcomes before they'd sign. My numbers were the highest on the team for 3 consecutive quarters. I mention this not to boast, but because it matters. Because when your mind is trained to catch the micro-expressions of strangers across a conference table, you'd think you'd notice your own husband lying to your face every night. But love makes you stupid in ways that intelligence can't fix. Darius was caramel fine with a fresh fade every 2 weeks, a smile that could talk its way past a locked door, and a voice that dropped low and sweet when he wanted something. We had been together 9 years. Married for 6 of them. He sold medical devices, or at least that's what his business card said. What he actually sold was charm, and for a long time I was his best customer. The cracks started so small I mistook them for nothing. A phone angled away from me at the dinner table. Business trips that used to last 2 nights stretching into 4. The way he'd come home smelling like hotel soap instead of the Creed cologne I'd bought him for his birthday. I'd ask him about it and he'd kiss my forehead, call me baby, tell me I was overthinking, then change the subject to something about the mortgage or the light bill. Always pulling me back into the machinery of our shared life so I'd forget the question I just asked. And I let him. Lord, I let him. Saturdays I'd be up at 7, blasting Yolanda Adams through the Bluetooth speaker, scrubbing the kitchen floor with bleach and Fabuloso until the whole condo smelled like a church basement on cleaning day. Darius would stumble out around noon, eat the breakfast I'd already plated and covered with foil, and disappear again by 3. He stopped touching me the way he used to. Not just the intimacy, the small things. His hand on the small of my back when we walked through a parking lot. The way he used to tug at my bonnet strings at night just to hear me fuss. All of it gone. Replaced by a politeness that felt like a closed door. My spirit kept nudging me. That quiet voice in the back of my ribs, the one Mama always said was God trying to get your attention before the lesson got expensive. One evening I was going through our shared bank account, something I hadn't done in months because Darius always handled the bills, always insisted on it with that confident wave of his hand, and the numbers didn't sit right. Withdrawals I couldn't account for. Cash pulls of $500 here, $800 there, always on days he claimed to be at a conference or a client dinner. My stomach went cold. Not angry yet. Just cold. I brought it up at the kitchen table one night, my voice measured, my hands wrapped around a mug of chamomile that had already gone lukewarm. Darius, there's money missing from the joint account. He didn't even look up from his phone. Business expenses, Simone. You know how it is. $5,000 in the last 3 months that I can't trace to a single invoice. He finally raised his eyes and something flickered there. Not guilt exactly, but the quick calculation of a man deciding which lie required the least effort. "I'll send you the receipts tomorrow." He never did. I asked again the following week and the week after that, and each time his excuses got shorter and his patience got thinner, until one night he pushed back from the table hard enough to rattle the good china in the hutch and said, "Why are you always on me about money? You make plenty. Why does everything have to be a federal case with you?" The accusation landed like a slap, and I felt my jaw tighten so hard my molars ached. But I swallowed it, fixed my face the way black women have been trained to do since forever, smoothed the expression, still the hands, breathed through the nose. I cleared the table in silence, washed every dish by hand even though we had a dishwasher, and went to bed without another word. That was the night I stopped asking Darius questions and started looking for the answers myself. What I found over the next several weeks rewired something inside me. The cash withdrawals matched hotel bookings I discovered on a second credit card he didn't think I knew about. A card with a billing address routed to a post office box on the south side. The hotels were local. Atlanta hotels. Not conferences in Charlotte or client dinners in Savannah. He was spending money in our own city and lying about where he was sleeping. I sat in my car in the parking deck at work one afternoon, engine off, staring at the credit card statement on my phone screen until the letters blurred. The air in the car was stale and too warm, and I could feel sweat gathering at my temples, my silk press starting to revert at the edges. My chest was so tight it felt like someone had laced a corset around my ribs and pulled. But I did not cry. Called Nia instead. Nia Patterson. My line sister, my lawyer, and the only woman I knew who could quote both Leviticus and contract law in the same breath. "I need you to walk me through what happens if I move the deed into my name during a refinance," I said, my voice so steady it surprised even me. There was a pause on her end. Then in that low, careful tone she used in depositions, "Simone, tell me everything." And I did. Every hotel receipt, every missing dollar, every lie I had swallowed like aspirin on an empty stomach. By the time I hung up, the sun had shifted behind the parking deck and my car was finally cool. Nia had a plan. And for the first time in months so did I. When the refinance paperwork came through 2 weeks later, I read every page twice. Darius skimmed nothing. He signed where I pointed, his pen moving fast and careless, already late for wherever he was really going. He didn't read a single clause. He didn't notice the deed transfer. He kissed my cheek, grabbed his keys and walked out smelling like that hotel soap again. And I stood in the kitchen holding his signature like a loaded weapon, my hands perfectly still. 3 months passed after the refinance, and I wore my secret like a second skin. Smooth on the outside, steel underneath. I went to work, hit my numbers, smiled at Darius across the dinner table and waited. I wasn't sure what I was waiting for exactly. Maybe for him to come clean. Maybe for the universe to give me a sign that I was wrong about all of it, that the hotels were explainable and the missing money was just bad bookkeeping and the woman's perfume I kept catching on his collar was a coworker's hug that lingered too long. I wanted to be wrong so badly that I could taste it, metallic and desperate, like biting the inside of my cheek during a meeting I couldn't leave. But then Darius got sent to a medical device conference in Dallas, or so he said, and I used those 4 days alone to go through everything. His laptop he'd left on the kitchen counter, still logged into his email. The messages weren't even hidden. They were right there in the main inbox, thread after thread with a woman named Tiffany. Pet names. Plans. Photos I wish I could bleach from my memory. And then the one that made my knees buckle. An email to a real estate agent, dated 3 weeks prior, inquiring about listing our condo for sale. Our condo. The one whose deed sat in a fireproof lockbox in my closet with only my name on it. He was planning to sell my home out from under me, and use the money to start over with her. I read that email sitting on the bathroom floor because my legs simply stopped working. The tile was cold through my pajama pants and the overhead light was flickering the way it always did when the bulb was about to die, and I pressed my back against the tub and stared at the ceiling until the words stopped swimming. My phone buzzed. A text from Darius. "Miss you, baby. Conference is boring without you." I turned the phone face down on the tile and pressed my palms against my eyes until I saw sparks. I didn't tell anyone. Not Keisha, not Nia, not even Mama, who could always hear a lie in my voice from 800 miles away. I needed to think. I needed to be strategic, not emotional, because emotional is what Darius expected. Emotional is what he'd use against me. Simone's always overreacting, Simone's always suspicious, you know how she gets. No. I was going to let him walk right into his own trap. So I smiled when he came home. Cooked his favorite, smothered pork chops, collard greens with smoked turkey, cornbread from scratch, not that jiffy nonsense, and watched him eat at my table with that same easy grin, completely unaware that I knew every single thing. The performance almost broke me. Sitting across from a man who was planning to leave me homeless while he scooped seconds onto his plate and told me the greens needed more pepper. My hands were trembling under the table, and I pressed my thighs together hard enough to feel the fabric of my dress crease against my skin. I held because I had to. Then the phone call came. I was in Houston for a sales summit, the big one, the annual conference where leadership handed out the regional awards. I had just finished presenting to a room of 200 people, my slides clean, my data tight, my heels clicking with authority across that stage. My phone lit up in the hallway afterward. Darius. I picked up expecting the usual small talk, when are you coming home, did you eat? Instead, his voice came through cold and loose, almost amused. I'm divorcing you, Simone. I already sold the apartment, so you're going to need to figure out where you're going to live. The hallway was long and fluorescent and smelled like hotel carpet cleaner. That chemical lavender that never quite covers what's underneath. A colleague passed me and waved. I waved back. My face was perfectly still. Inside, everything was collapsing, not with sadness, but with the specific white-hot clarity that comes when the last lie finally drops and you can see the whole ugly architecture of a person laid bare. He laughed. Actually laughed. Told me Tiffany deserved better than our little place, that he and Nicole. He even used the wrong name for a half second before correcting himself. Needed the money to build their life. I almost smiled at that. He couldn't even keep his lies consistent on the phone call where he was supposed to be destroying me. Sounds good, I said and hung up. My hand was shaking so hard the phone nearly slipped from my grip. I walked back into the conference hall, sat down in my assigned seat, and applauded the next presenter while my entire life burned behind my eyes. That night in my hotel room I called Nia. I called Keisha. I pulled out the deed transfer documents I kept digital copies of on my phone, and stared at them until the letters were branded into my vision. Darius thought he'd sold my condo. Darius thought I was stranded. Darius had no idea what was coming. By the time I packed my suitcase the next morning, my hands were steady again. I boarded that plane back to Atlanta with my shoulders squared and my jaw set. The cab from the airport smelled like pine air freshener, and the driver was playing Frankie Beverly on low. I stared out the window at the skyline I had built my life around and felt something settle into my bones. Not rage, not grief. Purpose. I walked into my building, rode the elevator to the 9th floor, and unlocked my front door to find Darius's jacket still slung over the chair, his Jordans kicked off by the entrance, his presence smeared across my space like a stain. I set my suitcase down, sat at the dining table, and opened the manila folder Nia had prepared. Divorce paperwork. Deed confirmation. Fraud documentation. Every receipt, every email, every lie printed, highlighted, and tabbed. I was sitting right there, pen in hand, when I heard the lock turn and the door swing open and the click of acrylic nails against my husband's arm. And there she was. Tiffany. Bronze skin and a lace front that probably cost more than her character was worth, standing in my living room like she'd been invited. Darius had his chest puffed out the way he always did when he was performing confidence he didn't actually have, his jaw tight, his eyes already scanning the room for proof that I'd crumbled. But I was sitting at my dining table in my own home with a folder full of his worst decisions, and the only thing crumbling in that room was him. So this is where we're staying? Tiffany said, her voice dripping with the kind of entitlement that only ignorance can produce. I stood up slow. Let the silence stretch until it was uncomfortable. Baby, I said, my voice sweet as peach cobbler and twice as warm. The only thing you're getting in this house is the truth. I turned to Darius. This is my home. The deed has been in my name for months. You signed it over during the refinance because you were too busy running to whatever hotel room you'd booked that week to read a single page of what you were putting your name on. His face went from smug to pale in under 3 seconds. Tiffany's nails released his arm like she'd touched something hot. Wait, she said, her voice climbing. You told me this was your apartment. You told me you sold it. He lied, I said simply. The sale is void. He had no legal right to sell property he doesn't own, and every dollar the buyer gave him is now evidence in a fraud case. Tiffany took a full step back from him. Darius opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. All that charm and not a single useful word. I wasn't finished. Here was the part Darius never saw coming. While I was in Houston between the phone call and the flight home, I hadn't just called Nia about the deed. I called his employer. I was a senior sales rep in pharmaceutical distribution. I knew how corporate compliance worked, the reporting structures, the ethics hotlines, the way companies protect themselves when an employee becomes a liability. I had documented every business trip Darius claimed to be on that didn't match his company's travel records. I had pulled the hotel receipts that showed he was in Atlanta on nights his expense report said Charlotte. I had packaged it all into a clean, professional summary, and sent it to his firm's compliance department with a CC to Nia. By the time Darius was standing in my living room with his mouth hanging open, his employer had already opened an internal investigation for expense fraud. He didn't just lose me. He didn't just lose the condo. He was about to lose the job he'd been hiding behind for 9 years. You should check your work email, I said, sliding the divorce papers across the table. And then you should sign these. Tiffany was already gone by then. Walked right out without a word. Her heels clicking fast down the hallway like the building was on fire. Darius sank onto the couch, the fight draining from his body the way air leaves a tire, slow then all at once. He signed the papers that evening. Didn't argue. Didn't negotiate. Just asked if he could keep the gaming chair. And I told him to take whatever he could carry by the end of the day because the locks were getting changed at 7. Keisha came over that night with a bottle of wine and a container of her mama's peach cobbler that was still warm at the edges. She kicked off her shoes at the door, looked around the apartment, half empty now, Darius's clutter finally gone, and let out a long breath. Your glow-up is showing, sis. I laughed. A real one. The kind that starts deep in your belly and doesn't stop until your eyes water. We sat on the couch with our glasses and our cobbler, and the city lights pouring through the balcony window like God was showing off. I thought about the woman I'd been 10 months ago, the one who swallowed questions and fixed her face and cooked pork chops for a man who was planning her ruin. She wasn't weak. She was waiting. And now she was done waiting. Over the next few weeks I repainted the bedroom a soft sage green, moved Mama's quilt from the closet to the bed where it belonged, and filled the living room with things that smelled like me. Shea butter candles, fresh eucalyptus in a mason jar, the lavender linen spray I used to only save for company. Nia called to say the divorce was finalized. Clean break. Darius didn't contest a thing. Last I heard, Tiffany had left him too, once the money dried up and the job disappeared. I can't say I felt sorry for him. I didn't feel much of anything about him at all anymore, and that absence of feeling was the most freeing thing I had ever known. One evening I found an old photo of us tucked in a kitchen drawer. Both of us grinning, my head on his shoulder, back when I thought we were building something permanent. I looked at it for a long time. Then I slid it into an envelope and put it away. It was part of my story, but it wasn't the whole story. Not anymore. I stood at my balcony that night, the Atlanta skyline glittering in the distance, the air warm and thick with the smell of magnolia from the courtyard below. I took a breath, a real one, the kind that fills your whole chest and doesn't hurt on the way out, and I smiled. Not because I'd won, because I was free. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I truly hope you enjoyed it. If it touched you, or if you saw a piece of yourself in Simone's journey, I'd love for you to subscribe to the channel so you never miss the next one. Share your own experiences in the comments. Your stories matter and this community is built on them. And if you have a moment, rate this story from 1 to 10 and let me know how it landed. Until next time, take care of yourselves.